A flight attendant slapped a black woman mid-flight, assuming she could get away with it. What she didn't realize? The woman's husband is a powerful billionaire, sitting just one row behind her. The moment he stood up, the entire cabin went silent, and the flight crew's fate was sealed. This jaw-dropping story is a powerful reminder that status doesn't always look like what you expect, and disrespecting the wrong person can cost you everything. Watch until the end to witness how karma boarded the flight and landed hard. The cabin hummed with pre-takeoff activity. First-class passengers settled into their spacious seats, laptops open, champagne flutes gently clinking. Among them sat Amara Chen Williams, elegant in her tailored blazer, reviewing presentation slides for tomorrow's meeting. The peaceful atmosphere shattered when Denise, a flight attendant with a pinched smile and too bright voice, stopped at Amara's row. Her eyes narrowed, scanning Amara from designer shoes to natural hair. "Excuse me," Denise said, voice dripping with fake sweetness. "I think you might be confused about your seat assignment." Amara looked up, momentarily disoriented. "I'm sorry?" "This is first class," Denise clarified, her tone suggesting she was speaking to a child. "Economy is toward the back." She gestured vaguely behind her with a perfectly manicured hand. The businessman across the aisle glanced over briefly before returning to his newspaper. No one else seemed to notice. "I'm aware this is first class," Amara replied evenly, reaching for her boarding pass. "Seat 3A. That's this one." Denise barely glanced at the ticket. "There must be some mistake." "Let me see your ID." Amara's heartbeat quickened, but her face remained composed as she retrieved her driver's license. She'd been here before. The raised eyebrows, the double-checking, the assumption she didn't belong. Denise examined the ID for an uncomfortably long time. "This seat is typically reserved for our platinum members." "I am a platinum member," Amara responded, her patience wearing thin. "I fly this route twice monthly." Denise's smile tightened. "Well, something's not right here. We need this seat for another passenger. You'll need to move to economy." The white couple behind Amara exchanged uncomfortable glances. A few rows back, a man in a business suit shifted in his seat, watching the interaction with increasing concern. "That's completely unacceptable," Amara said firmly. "I booked and paid for this seat months ago." Denise's professional veneer cracked. "Listen, honey, I don't make the rules. This section isn't really meant for everyone. There's perfectly good seats in the back where you might feel more comfortable." The slap of prejudice hung in the air. Several passengers looked away, unwilling to witness the ugliness unfolding. Amara felt her cheeks burn with humiliation and anger. "Are you suggesting—" Amara began, but was cut off. "Ma'am, don't make this difficult," Denise hissed, dropping all pretense of courtesy. "Some folks just don't fit the first-class profile, if you know what I mean. Now grab your bougie bag and move before I call security." A deep voice cut through the tension. "Excuse me." All heads turned toward the back of first class. A tall black man in an impeccably tailored suit stood, calm authority radiating from him. "That's my wife you're speaking to," he said, his voice level but carrying easily through the cabin. "And I couldn't help but overhear what sounds remarkably like discrimination." Denise's face hardened. "Sir, this doesn't concern you." "Malik Williams," he continued, as if she hadn't spoken, extending a business card. "General Counsel for Chen Williams International. And it very much concerns me when an airline employee tells my wife she doesn't fit the profile for a seat she rightfully purchased." He moved forward, standing beside Amara's seat. "Perhaps you'd like to clarify what you meant by that profile comment. I'm curious which part of my wife's appearance triggered your concern. Her skin tone, perhaps, or her natural hair." The cabin fell silent. Denise's mouth opened and closed, her face paling. "I was just following protocol," she stammered. "Fascinating," Malik replied. "I'd love to see that protocol in writing. In fact," he removed his phone, "I'm recording this conversation now for our legal team. Please continue explaining why my wife needs to relocate despite having a confirmed first-class ticket." Denise's eyes darted around the cabin, finding no allies. "There's been a misunderstanding," she finally managed. "No misunderstanding at all," Malik corrected gently. "This is textbook discrimination, and we both know it. Now, my wife will remain in her assigned seat, and you'll provide her the same courtesy and service you offer every other passenger in this cabin. Or we can continue this conversation with your supervisors, the airline CEO, whom I golfed with last month, incidentally, and eventually, in federal court under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act." Denise's face flushed crimson. "Of course she can stay," she muttered, before hurrying toward the galley. As the plane pushed back from the gate, a heavy silence blanketed the cabin. Denise reappeared for safety demonstrations, her movements mechanical, avoiding eye contact with anyone. Passengers shifted uncomfortably, some embarrassed by their own inaction, others pretending nothing had happened. The flight proceeded in tense quiet. When Denise served drinks, her hands trembled slightly. She placed Amara's sparkling water on her tray without meeting her eyes. Her earlier bravado evaporated. The other flight attendants, sensing something amiss, compensated with extra attentiveness toward Amara and Malik. Halfway through the flight, the captain's voice crackled over the intercom, requesting Denise's presence in the cockpit. She emerged 20 minutes later, face ashen, and disappeared into the rear galley for the remainder of the journey. As the plane began its descent, a different flight attendant approached with an iPad. "Mr. and Mrs. Williams," she said quietly, "our Director of Customer Experience would like to speak with you upon landing. He's waiting in the executive lounge." In the private lounge, James Harrington, silver-haired and grave-faced, was already standing when they entered. "Mr. and Mrs. Williams, I cannot begin to express how deeply disturbed I am by what occurred today," he began without preamble. "We've reviewed the incident, including footage from the cabin cameras and statements from other passengers." He handed them each a business card. "Denise Reynolds has been placed on immediate administrative leave pending a full investigation. This is not who we are as an airline." "With respect, Mr. Harrington," Malek responded, "this is exactly who you are until you make structural changes. This isn't about one bad Apple employee. It's about a culture that enabled her to believe she could act this way without consequences." Harrington nodded soberly. "You're absolutely right, which is why I've just come from an emergency meeting with our executive team. We're implementing mandatory anti-bias training for all customer-facing staff, effective immediately. We're also revising our complaint procedures and establishing an independent review board for discrimination claims." He slid a formal letter across the table. "Additionally, the airline wishes to offer a public apology and has authorized me to offer compensation, though we recognize no amount of money addresses the humiliation Mrs. Williams experienced today." Amara, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke. "Your compensation isn't necessary, Mr. Harrington. What I want is assurance that no one else boards one of your planes and is made to feel they don't belong because of how they look." "We're announcing our new policies publicly tomorrow," Harrington affirmed. "Your experience, though deeply regrettable, has catalyzed changes we clearly needed to make." 2 weeks later, Denise Reynolds' employment was terminated. The airline launched its new anti-discrimination initiative with a candid acknowledgement of the incident that prompted it. Social media erupted with similar stories from minority passengers across multiple airlines, sparking an industry-wide examination of implicit bias in customer service. 6 months later, Amara boarded another flight, tension instinctively tightening her shoulders as she approached first class. The flight attendant greeted her professionally, not with excessive warmth that screamed, "Look how not racist we are," nor with Denise's thinly veiled contempt. As Amara settled in, she noticed a young black woman being questioned about her seat assignment a few rows ahead. The flight attendant wasn't hostile, but the familiar script played out. The extra verification, the subtle surprise. Without hesitation, Amara stood up. "Excuse me," she said, her voice carrying that same calm authority she'd admired in Malik that day. "Is there a problem with this passenger's seating?" The flight attendant straightened immediately. "No problem at all, ma'am. Just routine verification." "Interesting," Amara replied. "I've been in this cabin twice today and haven't seen anyone else's seating routinely verified." The young woman flashed Amara a grateful look as the attendant quickly moved on. Later, as they cruised at 30,000 feet, she passed Amara a napkin with a note. "Thank you for seeing me." That night, Amara updated the spreadsheet she and Malik had started, documenting incidents, responses, airline policies. Their legal team had filed actions against 3 major carriers. 2 new anti-discrimination bills were moving through Congress with their advocacy group's support. The work was exhausting. The changes were incremental. But as Amara added today's incident to their growing database, she felt something stronger than hope. Determination. This wasn't about changing hearts and minds anymore. This was about changing systems, laws, and consequences. The fight wasn't just continuing, it was evolving. And so was she. It wasn't a perfect solution. Bias wouldn't be eliminated through one initiative or even one comprehensive reform. But in creating structures that made equity measurable, accountable, and operationally integrated, Sebastian had established conditions where continuous improvement became not just possible, but expected. True first class, she reflected, had nothing to do with the width of a seat or the quality of the champagne. It was about establishing systems where human dignity wasn't determined by appearance, where belonging wasn't questioned based on demographic assumptions, where service excellence meant consistency rather than preferential treatment. The view from 38,000 feet offered perspective not just on the landscape below, but on the journey still ahead, a journey that would continue long after final flight, carried forward by transformed systems and, perhaps more importantly, by who had converted uncomfortable awareness into committed action. When Denise first approached her seat, Amara's composed exterior masked a familiar internal debate. Speak up now and be labeled angry? Stay silent and surrender her dignity? She'd perfected the art of navigation, calculating exactly how much self-advocacy each situation allowed before white discomfort transformed her from professional black woman to problem. Throughout the confrontation, memories flickered through her mind. Her mother teaching her to be twice as good, half as loud. The VP position she lost after challenging a colleague's racist comment. The real estate agent who showed her the more suitable neighborhoods. Each indignity had taught her restraint as survival. When Malik intervened, part of her felt profound relief. Another part, a twinge of resentment. His defense was exactly what she'd planned to say. Yet when he spoke, people listened. His words held weight, hers never seemed to carry. During the flight, Amara sat perfectly still, refusing to give Denise the satisfaction of seeing her discomfort. But beneath her calm facade, something fundamental was shifting. She watched passengers who had witnessed everything suddenly fascinated by their magazines, their complicity through silence all too familiar. In the weeks following, Amara found herself changing. The corporate mask she'd worn for years, carefully modulating her tone, straightening her hair for big presentations, laughing off microaggressions, began to feel suffocating rather than protective. She started speaking at diversity panels, not with sanitized corporate talking points, but with unflinching honesty. She mentored young professionals of color, teaching them to recognize their worth rather than how to make white colleagues comfortable. At executive meetings, she stopped translating her experiences into palatable anecdotes. 6 months later, watching that young woman being questioned, Amara realized she no longer calculated the cost of speaking up. The transformation wasn't about becoming bolder, but about unbecoming all the careful, constructed versions of herself she'd created to navigate white spaces safely. Standing up for that stranger felt like coming home to herself, a self she'd fragmented and hidden behind acceptable facades. The spreadsheet she and Malik maintained wasn't just documentation for legal action. It was reclamation of all the times she'd remained silent, all the injuries she'd absorbed to keep the peace. This new Amara didn't just want policy changes, she wanted a reckoning. And in the space between the woman she'd been trained to be and the woman she was becoming, she discovered something unexpected: freedom.